Hello friend, welcome back. In our previous video, we have created one of the page as the edit artist, and here we load our form, right? And also we define our ID, that means a specific requested ID, all the data now is visible. So now I want to do, if you click as a update, that means if you want to change that first name, the last name and the installment, and then if you click as a update, then it should be updated. So when it should be updated, that means it should be just store this data again, right? So for the stored data, I have already defined this part. If you go to our view, and into the view, if you go to our musician form, this function, into the function, what exactly we did. So I have already discussed about that things with you. Here I created one of the object, and then into this position I define one of the condition. First of all, it should be check is post it or not, when it should be post, when it should be as a valid, then it should be save this data into our database table, right? So that is actually our commit. With this commit, I just simply define as a true. That means it should be saved this data. And after that, I just simply define when it should be data will be saved. Then it should be return our index function, right? So I have already discussed about that things with you. So now we have to do the same things because of all here you can see in our edit artist. First of all, here I define two things. First of all, here it should be load our form. That means the musician form, and into the musician form I pass our all that artist specific ID data. So for the reasons here I take one of the variable, and into this variable from our musicians table I get all that our object with our ID, right? So now I want to actually define the same things, because here we have to insert this data again. So here I want to update it. So if you want to do that work, it should be just like same. Better I just simply copy it. Okay, I just simply copy it. And now after this, so after this I want to do in particular that position, I just simply paste it. Okay, so here I think friend you already know about it. So first of all, it should be checked. So here I have defined one of the update button in our edit, that means edit artist. If you go to that edit artist, here you can see there is actually the method as a post method. So I have already defined this post method. So now first of all, it should be check is method is posted or not, and then in our forms and musician form. So I have already created this class in our model, into the model. So not model, that is actually the form. Into the form I have already defined this class as a musician form class, right? So into this musician form class I have already loaded all that our field. So now here I define this. So that is our model, and that is our request, that is our post. And then I just simply define if is valid, then it should be save this data. But here one thing now we have to do, we have to save this data with a specific ID, right? So here if you want to save this data, that means this data is one ID data. So I have to save this data with this one ID data, that means the requested ID data. So if you want to save this data with a specific ID, for the reasons in our function, that means in our function request I have already defined our data as a artist ID. So now also we have to pass it. Before you can see into this musician form area, I have already loaded our all that specific requested ID data. So now we have to also define these things. So here we have to define that things in our form, that means our this musician form, into the request post, and with the request post area we have to define our this all the data, that means a specific all the data. So here I defining it with the artist info. So here you have to pass it, right friend? And after that it should be just like the same. If it is actually valid, then it should be save this data. So I just simply save this data with the commit and our true. Okay, and when it should be save this data, that means after when you update it, then I want to redirect it to our album list page. So for the album list page I have already defined another function. If you go here you can see I have already defined another function as a album list. So here I want to pass it. So into the album list, here I have already defined the request and our artist ID. So it should be simply redirected to our this area. So now I want to do, here I want to define the return, and into the return area I want to pass when it should be perfectly saved this data, it should be redirected to our album list function area with this request, and also that is our ID. So with this specific ID it should be returned. Okay friend, that's all you have to do. I think it should be very much clear to you. So it should be just like that same. Here only we have to pass our existing data, that means our existing specific ID data, right? So that's all you have to do. Now let's check this out. If you now click as a save all, I just click as a save all. So first of all, I want to check it, everything is perfect. Now go here, go to our home again, go to the Kazarian, click as edit. So it should be redirected to our this album list page with ID, right? So for the reasons here, you can see I just simply define as a album list, it should be redirected and with this request, and also it should be redirected with our specific ID. Now let's check this out. I want to edit it, click as a edit. So now I want to edit our first name as a Kazi1, last name as a Aryan1, and also one and also one. Okay, now click as the update. Yes, now you can see, friend, now our artist is updated. That means Kazi first name 1 is updated, our last name is updated, our installment name is also updated. And when it's updated, by default you can see it's now redirected to our which page? It's now redirected to our edit artist page with the ID. I think it should be very much clear to you. So when it should be saved, then I just simply define as a return album list function. Into the album list function, I have already defined our page. If you go our album list, into the album list page, you can see I have defined our album list page. That means the album list.html. And here also I define another things. It should be redirected with this request. That means requested all the data with our ID. For the reasons, you can see it's now showing as edit HTML page and with our ID. Now if you go again our Jackson, so now here I edit it, so that is the ID as a 2. Click I want to update it, click as a update. Now you can see only our first name is updated, and after that it's redirected to our edit artist with a specific ID. So how much easy it is? I think every line it should be very much clear to you, because we already know that main basic things, friend. So if you already know about that basic, you can see everything it should be very much easy to you, because of all everything is just same here. I only want to update our existing this data, which data I get with our specific ID. That means in our primary key here I define our requested ID. This requested ID means actually that is actually our requested ID, right? So here only we have to define that things in our instant area. That's all you have to do. So that's how you can actually update it. So friend, here we successfully update our artist. So here we successfully now we can change our artist name. So that is our second name, that means the last name, and then installment. So now they have also another option for the album. So if you want to update this album, how can do that work? In our next video, I will show you that things with the live example. So thanks for watching. I will see you in the next video.